Hi, it's Carly and Prem here. Day 19 of our vulnerability challenge. I certainly feel challenged. The last couple have been pretty late at night as we're like, oh my god, we've got to meet our commitment and like do this thing that we're committed to. So today we want to talk a bit about self-esteem, really. One of the things that I feel a lot of passion about, I've spoken to this in some of the previous Facebook Lives, is really affirming each other in our dignity, like really affirming the intrinsic value that we all have, you know, and in that value that we all have a right to take up space, a right to have our version of reality, our own sense of truth, a right to feel particular ways and act in particular ways. And I've been reflecting on this a little bit today in particular. If you've been watching the past few, particularly last night's one, just reflecting around some of the things that I've been triggered in. And in particular, I've been aware of where in the last 24 hours I felt some collapse in my system, where I've lost touch with some of my sense of reality and my just kind of validity, you know, the things I was just saying, my rights to my perspective and so on. And it's kind of this place where if I'm getting some kind of feedback, whether it be from life or from people, that I make it about me, you know, and I somehow make it mean that I'm not good enough, I'm inadequate, or I'm not doing it right. And this has been a pretty common thing for me, you know. It's been hard for me at times to take feedback. It's been really easy for me to get defensive. And to me, this really comes down to low self-esteem, you know, where I make it mean something about me not being worthy somehow, and I kind of collapse and go into shame. And what I've in particular been thinking about in relation to this today is losing touch with reality. So it's like the reference points, the meaning that I'm making about what's happening, I make it mean something about me rather than about the context, about the situation that's going on. And that's really struck me, you know, and I'd love to have us explore a little bit tonight just about like practical examples of how that's occurred for each of us. So let me just pause there and see, you know, what's present for you hearing me frame that.
What's present for me is this piece around like where do we get our worth from? You know, what is it that has us be worthy to have self-esteem, you know? And I think about our culture and how we are conditioned to seek outside of ourselves to find our worth or our value, whether that's how much money we make, how many friends we have, where we hang out, what's our postcode, how many degrees we have, these kinds of things. And or even, you know, what how we behave, like our, you know, how we act. And you know, I do believe that self-esteem you know, improves when we do the things that we say we're going to do, for sure. However, like, I think that it's in terms of collapse, what I relate to in that is where I have thought that my behavior, either my own opinion of my behavior or someone else's opinion of my behavior, has been less than good enough for them, but I've made that I'm less than good enough versus my behavior was less than good enough for me or for that person. And yeah, I think just, you know, it's a practice for me to remind myself I'm inherently worthy just because I am, you know, and that's it. There's nothing that I need to have done, to have achieved, to be. There's nothing that can make me any more or less, actually, other than this. You know, like I'm no better or less than anyone else, you know. And when I think about self-esteem, I think about the flipping from being better than to less than, and comparison. And I love how Nathaniel
Brandon.
No. Oh. She talks so much about vulnerability. Brene Brown says, you know, she talks about not puffing ourselves up to be more than who we are, not shrinking down and back, being less than who we are, but just being right-sized. And I'm often checking what that means for me. What does it mean in this moment to just be humble and be perfectly imperfect and not have my value kind of riding on anything at all.
Yeah. Nice. The piece that I'm like particularly interested in at this point in time is this like piece around shifting reference points, you know, and for me, you know, there's been like a few instances where I've had like feedback in the past few days, and it's like I've lost sight of actually, you know, where I was challenged in things. You know, it's like, you know, there was like a couple of places that you've mentioned to me, like where you might have been challenged or like you wanted something different, and rather than just like hearing that and then also being with like, well, hang on, this was my experience, and you know, I keep using my kids as examples because my kids are in on school holidays and that's very present for me, and it's often a place I'm challenged by it too, you know, and you know, a place where you know, which, you know, like also doing some of the parenting, and like, you know, it's like there's lots of demands, and kind of we were negotiating like our time around some of that, and rather than just like, oh, okay, yeah, you're finding it harder, and this, yeah, there is a lot of time to do child activities, and okay, like I'm challenged in that too. Instead, I just went into like, oh my God, they're my kids, and it's all up to me, and I'm the bag somehow like not doing it right because you know you feel that way or something like that, you know. And, yeah, I'm so struck by that, and I've just been realizing like, what is it to like be in this place of both our truths coexisting, you know. You know, particularly if those truths both have like some kind of challenge and negotiation of boundaries in them, you know. So what is it to like be in this place of like where we're both in like strong esteem, you know, and actually esteeming each other, you know, in the process, you know, and such that we can then actually make like stronger meaning about what's going on, you know. And, so I'm like struck by in like the sense making that occurred for me in that place was such that it had me retreat and like just go into some kind of shame or something, you know. So that's where there was the collapse, and I kind of, you know, just went into feeling insecure and inadequate, you know. And my perception is that's actually hugely common in so much of communication, you know. And I think like low self-esteem is like just so rampant in our culture, you know. And it's like it's actually at the basis of so much conflict, you know, and you know, conflict that's destructive, where we're not actually able to stay in and kind of make richer meaning and negotiate around, you know, what our shared needs and boundaries are.
A couple of things I'd love to hear for you, what esteeming each other looks like.
Nice. Well, for me, I think a big part of it is like validating each other. Like, you know, I like it. Wow, I imagine saying things like, "I'm hearing that it sounds hard," you know, and that actually you here's the intentions that you're having, both to look after yourself and whatever it is, you know. I think validating particularly where the positive intentions are is really important. Yeah. And to just say like explicitly and kind of non-explicitly, you know, non-verbally, hey, you know, your perspective counts. You know, you have value. You know, you're valid. You're totally allowed to have this perspective and this experience. You know.
I super love the sweetness in that, and I love it, like, to cultivate that here. And then my attention also goes to really wanting to know that I can esteem myself even when you can't, you know, or that there's no kind of dependency in that. And I really want to champion for people to be able to really do that for themselves, you know. And I think it's a really beautiful practice to have in relationship with people that we love. And there's something about like the feeling of feeling sovereign, you know. It's like this interesting balance between my sovereignty and my humility. And I know my esteem is intact when I'm acting in ways that I like, you know, that I can feel I really like that. I really, you know, I'm like I'm doing things like you just said, you know, I'm acting in a way that my desire is to esteem another person. Or, you know, when I say acting in ways that I like, what I mean is like I feel my own fullness, you know. And then like where it's interesting is when what is it then when I'm triggered to like stay in that space of right-sizedness around maybe when I've stuffed up, you know, or like said the wrong thing and I've triggered somebody, or I forgot to, I don't know, lock the door and they're upset about it, or, you know, when I genuinely offend somebody, you know, make mistakes, what is it to like be able to esteem myself, you know. And yeah, I think it's rampant in our culture that people just can actually rip themselves apart from making a mistake, or like act in a way that's shameless, you know, to protect that the shame, acting in a way that's shameless. I don't care, that doesn't bother me, they do it all the time, you know, and actually become quite defensive and sort of blamey to sort of like act that there's no collapse happening, you know. And I think our culture is rife with that, for sure.
Nice. Yeah.
Something that has me kind of a marker that I have to know sort of what I'm in, which, you know, am I in collapse, am I in kind of better than, is to just notice like where my attention is, you know. And over the last couple of days when you've been in some process, much of that time my attention's been on myself, you know, rather than having my attention on you and like figuring out what you're thinking and why you're doing that and, you know, how that's impacting me, you know. My attention's been on myself and what am I feeling in this moment, and what's true for me in this moment. And I've kept my attention quite inwards, and that's had me feel my ground, you know. And my ground, by my ground, what I mean is just feeling stable and feeling like it's okay for someone to be in a process, because no doubt I'm going to be in a process not so long, you know. So enjoy it whilst it's not me, basically. But feels good to me to feel, you know, the kind of what I have cultivated in terms of keeping a sense of self when, you know, someone else may not be having positive thoughts about me. And I think it's not always that way. Some people I can get way more triggered by. I think your level of containment has that, might be easier for me. But yeah, I think part of this process of esteeming myself, healthy self-esteem, and staying in my center is kind of keeping my attention on myself when there's triggering happening, not daring to look at who else is to blame, you know. That's really dangerous waters. And then just like doing a lot of self-talk, basically, to the little one inside of me.
Yeah.
You know.
I'm like, you know, we call this Facebook Live Self-Esteem and Collapse. And I'm like curious for you, like a lot of what I'm hearing is like being in this place of staying esteemed, which is like totally where I think we all want to get to. And I think collapse is pretty common as well. And I'm like, I'm curious for you, you know, like what collapse feels like and what the process is for you, you know, when you go into that kind of a place of collapse.
Yeah. Let me think about a time recently where I felt collapse. Okay, yeah. So collapse for me, well, my attention will typically go outside of myself and will be in what is that person thinking about me. So like, I think I'm like really good at knowing what other people think about me. And, you know, I've like prided myself all my life on that until I started checking out my assumptions.
Yeah.
Yeah, can be pretty crazy. So essentially when I go into collapse, my attention will go straight to what's the other person thinking of me, and my attention can stay there I get obsessive of like thinking about what they're thinking about me. And then the more that I do that, the more I feel my body contracting often into a somewhat state of anxiety. If I'm trying to push up and out of it, I'll feel anger, like I'll feel heat and power through my body. But underneath that, I feel the collapse, you know. But if I'm just in collapse, I feel anxiety and a closing inwards in my body. And then usually at some point it flatlines where it's like a beep, like I go kind of numb. At a certain point, I feel my nervous system sort of stop the sensation, and I pop out. It would pop up and out of my body, where I just not gonna disassociate.
Yep.
And you know, and then in that place, usually I'll get busy. So once I dissociate, then I don't have strong feelings anymore, and then I'll go and get busy. I'll start cleaning, or I'll get busy with work, you know. Two of my, you know, isms are busyness and workaholism, you know. So I think it's good to know that.
Yeah.
So that I can check. Am I doing this because I genuinely have desire to, or am I in some form of avoidance?
Yeah. So your attention goes out, and then there's like, I think you said something about the sensation that you're feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then at some point you basically go numb, you disassociate.
Yeah.
And then you find things that keep you distracted, like away from what you're actually feeling. You go into busyness.
Yes. Usually things that I'm good at. So I'll go into like cleaning, making things look beautiful, and doing work well, you know, and then like admin tasks that I can cross off. And then I feel like it's a false sense of esteem. It's like a false esteem. And then usually at a certain point I'll end with like, it'll end in like exhaustion, or it'll start coming out the sides, you know, out of the side of my neck. I'll start to just get really tight and scratchy because essentially I've overridden myself and gotten busy, not self-cared. And then there's somewhere inside, there's a little girl who's like super alone, super isolated, super frightened. And then there's this like other person who's like coming in and being perfect, and is essentially she's hard to connect with. Needless want less.
The other thing you mentioned anger as well, and today I've been feeling quite a bit of anger, and I've been thinking about, and it's actually felt really good. It's felt like healthy, and it's like, to me, I'm like, some of it I think is just some resentment that I'm like processing, but there's also a place where it's like I'm almost like aware of, like some places I've allowed myself to be violated in a way. Like I've self-violated, you know, I haven't held my boundaries, you know, and it's like the energy of anger is actually one that has me re-establishing my sense of reality. I'm like, actually, it's okay for me to be like this, you know, and I've kind of had anger in different directions, you know, I've had it at myself and I've had it outwards a little bit, but it's like, there's like I don't know, like a feeling at my skin out again or something in that energy. It's like I feel myself like here again somehow. So like re-establishing that sense of self after going into, you know, that kind of disconnection or something like that. You know, and that's quite interesting to me. And I think I've seen that pattern quite a bit, you know, like of both in myself and other people, like the importance of like the energy of anger. And I think it can be dangerous too, but actually held in a healthy way to kind of come back into that place of whatever it is, personal power.
I feel different about that. I think about, like, for myself it's different, you know. What I hear you say is that for you it brings you into more of a state of uprightness where you can feel your power again. For me, my anger has me dissociate.
Huh.
For me, if I feel angry, I'm usually in some kind of resentment, so I'm rethinking over something, which is actually taking me away from feeling myself. And then I feel angry about the things that I'm thinking about, and I come back to like that thing that I said just before, which is like there's this little girl who got hurt somewhere. Like, yes, self-violation feels true, you know, and that's a pretty strong word, but it's like, I guess it's where I didn't have good boundaries around whether I took something in that someone said about me or their feelings that they were having. I somehow made myself responsible for it, whether they made me responsible or not. Yeah, like I wouldn't have good boundaries for that to happen. But I think about the one who is hurting because of that, and when I'm in anger, I'm in no position to be caring. Like I think about your little girls, for example, and if they were hurting, and then if I was being with them in an angry way, how that might have them be upright, but my little one doesn't need that, you know. In that time, there's like a gentle inquiry that needs to happen as to what happened there for me, and what did you make that mean about you, and I feel sad hearing that, and esteeming that little one like a loving parent, you know. Yeah, because for me, when I go into power, anger and power, I get busy, and I get like I get back this feeling where I can push and go again, you know. And I did that for a long time, and that for me, that's not my recipe anymore.
Nice. I think I'm inclined to just move towards wrapping up at this point. But I love that we had some difference there, and I'd love to do a future live around circling around difference and what it is to kind of explore difference.
Totally.
But I think just summarizing a little bit for me to finish up, I think these are really important things to talk about, and to be able to talk about, and to be able to kind of hold each other in and see each other in, care for each other in these places, and I'm feeling appreciation for the complexity of it, you know. And I think we've already touched on quite a lot of threads in this conversation, you know. There's can go into better than and less than, and you know, my attention can go in different places, and there's sensations and disassociation, and you know, what I do to then kind of escape from what I'm feeling, and it's like there's a whole big maelstrom of complexity, and you know, what comes out of basically low self-esteem and how that shows up relationally. So I just kind of want to presence that, and I'm glad that we've surfaced some of that. Like, I'm aware this is another quite long Facebook Live, but I think it's important. Any final thoughts from you?
I loved how you just wrapped up then and pointed to all the different themes, and it is so complex. I feel like so much care about what we're talking about in this particular conversation, and I feel so much care about how tender, feeling messed up around taking stuff in, and losing sense of self in that. I've had so much in my history that I feel a lot of care for you in these few days where you've been processing that. I feel a lot of care, you know, for whenever I see someone in this place. A lot of care today for myself when I go into it, because shame is intense to be in, and I feel super passionate about doing whatever I can, using my own journey to bring light to that, and committing to continuing to do that work internally and here with my friends and my family to keep shifting that in our culture.
Totally. Yeah, well, I think that's the final thing that's present for me to say, and it's the stand that I see us taking in Triibe for the essential dignity, like I started, you know, for all human beings, you know, and actually holding space and calling all of us into our sovereignty, into, you know, the powerful expression of who we are and what that is to coexist in that kind of place.
And welcome it all.
And welcome it all, totally. Yeah. Awesome.
Thanks for watching, guys.
Thank you.